say you lean into that failure. You have to lean into the fire.
Tell me about that.
Taking people from nothing or something and transforming them into sales professionals. Pique curiosity, change brains. 6 figures of my stuff and a 7-figure deal overall.
What makes you tick?
No greater thing in life that you could ask for. Just being excited about what you're doing every day.
Mike, welcome to the podcast. And for those listening, you are in for a very different episode today. Mike, what makes you tick?
That's a great question, Tolu. And I wanted to take a moment because we know that what makes you tick being the name of the podcast, the irony here is that I sent a message to Richard and I didn't hear back from him immediately. I sent it on a Friday. And then on a Monday is when I heard back. And what happened is that my son graduated 2nd grade. Yeah, we did that. We went out to Mexican food for dinner. And the following day, I don't know if you're a parent as well, but what happens is when you're a parent, you just eat the scraps of what your kids don't eat. And so the following day we had leftovers. My kids didn't eat them. I scarfed down like 3 cheese quesadillas. And about 2 o'clock the following morning, so this is like Sunday morning, 2 a.m., I wake up with that feeling where you're like, I have to release all of these, the bad thing that I put inside myself. And so I went into the bathroom. I accomplished the feat. And yet what normally happens after that is you feel refreshed. You feel like you've accomplished the mission here. I didn't have that feeling. I had a feeling of like, there's more work to be done here. There's more work to be done. For the next 24 hours, proceeded to like attempt to get that feeling you're seeking of just relief from the trauma going inside your stomach. And it never happened. And I couldn't sleep. I was sweating, muscle aches. There was no position that I could be comfortable in. And I was in the following night, I was in my 15th shower of like cold, hot, cold, just something to provide me relief. And I looked down at my leg and I saw this little nub on it. And I had this experience before and I looked closer and what was it? It was a tick. I had about a week-long tick that was on me. Looking at you look at the Google images after, how old is this tick? How long has this been here and whatnot? And so I thought, perhaps this is related in some way to how I've been feeling and why I'm getting no relief here. And you do the Googling like you do nowadays, and you ask ChatGPT, and sure enough, they say Rocky Mountain spotted tick fever. Like we're back on the Oregon Trail. And so I went to here in the States, we have the urgent care, and I explained the situation. And they said, you're the second one this week. So they took me back, they gave me the medicine, and now we're all better. But for a better part of several days, I was feeling the effects of this tick. And then who do I get a response from? The What Makes You Tick podcast. Richard, I'm like, oh, this is serendipity. We've got to do the podcast.
That is hell. I did not know where you were going with that story, but I'm glad we stuck with it because that's hilarious. That is hilarious.
Yeah.
So, is there anything else that makes you tick that you'd want to talk about?
Well, we were talking before the show here, and you were asking me lots of questions about like why I do the things that I do, and what makes me tick on it. And I suppose like if I could summarize it. Why do anything in life? Why do I do anything? Why do I make my podcast? Why do I work in sales? Why do I live the life that I lead? And I guess it's to find the joy in the little things, to do something, to do it. And I think not everybody has that same level of like you do something I have a phrase that usually on the sales team, when you're going to do something, might as well do it really well. Right? You might as well put your heart and effort into making it really cool because that's where the stories come from. That's having a podcast and talking to strangers. That's where stories come from. That's why we had this conversation, all that. So I guess that what makes me tick is, I guess, an insatiable appetite and curiosity to do things for the sake of doing them.
Where do you think that comes from?
Not many friends growing up. As a kid, lonely, middle child. I got to occupy my time with something. And I guess I've always sought I like that feeling of laughing, of humor. Like who does? I don't like laughing. No, everybody likes that feeling, laughing and humor. And I guess growing up, I never had the appetite necessarily to care whether or not anybody else was in on the joke with me. I just think some things are funny to do. And I think that's where my podcast comes from too. I started it because I think it's funny to like have these stories and conversations with people out there. I don't really care if anybody else listens to it. What I care about is me getting a giggle out of it at the end of the day. And I think you can do that with anything, right? You stare long enough at a tree or this wrist. This is a wrist strength increaser. Like there's a story here that you can make out of it if you just spend enough time focusing in on it. What was the question?
Where do you think that curiosity and that desire
to
do that?
A sad childhood.
Okay. For those of you who are listening audibly and can't see the video, he had like a wrist strengthening grips thing that he was playing with at the same time, in case you can't see it. There is something I saw on your LinkedIn that I would love for you to talk a bit about. It says, every sales rep I've ever been fortunate enough to lead comes away branded with my favorite mantra. It is the hottest fires that forge the strongest steel. Tell me about that.
Okay, great. That's a great prompt and story for you. I think it was in 2014. I could have that wrong. The Super Bowl, which is a big football game. You know me, I'm a sports fan. A big football game here in the United States happened in Detroit, Michigan. Not my hometown, but I grew up on the outskirts of Detroit. And if you haven't, if you're not worldly like me, having grown up in Detroit, Detroit has a reputation of being a hardened city, one where there's much violence and crime. Which I haven't found to necessarily been the truth in my time in Detroit. Anywho, 2014, the Super Bowl happens there, and a commercial comes up on it. And in the commercial, there's this grovelly voice and these depictions of Detroit. It's concrete and broken buildings and all this stuff. And the narrator's talking about how we're not the prettiest city, we're not this and that. And then it says this part, it kind of like transforms into the second part, which is they say it is, it's the hottest fires that forge the strongest steel. And that's the story of Detroit. And then it ends with Eminem getting out of his Chrysler 300 and going onto a stage and like the choir, and you just have you get tingles. Even thinking about it, I get tingles from that. And so I kind of took away that like the hottest fires forge the strongest steel for any challenge that I have in life, right? Like something bad has happened. I lost a deal. Excellent. Like that's exactly what I want to use in order to make myself that much stronger for the next one.
And how have you found that impacts people that you lead? Because there's one thing you feeling that and you having that connection. How has that worked for the people that you lead?
Well, I feel like I've raised a lot of sales folks from being either in some adjacent career or coming straight out of college or school or neither. But generally like building inside sales team, building business development teams, creating programs to bring people from nothing into professional sales folks. And one of the things, sales gets this, you get a depiction of it in different places that it's all about like rah, 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 go, win, kill, crush, and all that fun stuff. And you should have a mentality of go, 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 crush, win. But the reality is that it's a boatload of failure. And if that failure is framed as like, this is a bad thing and you shouldn't like it and don't do it, you're going to have a really bad time. Like I've seen a lot of people just not be able to handle just the constant failure. For me, I say you lean into that failure. You have to lean into the fire because that's what makes you, I don't know the questions for this podcast, but if they're all like, tell me about the good deals, like I don't have that many stories that I remember like off the top of my head where a great deal came together and happened. Do I have them? Absolutely. I wouldn't be here unless I could make sales with great deals, but they don't stick in my mind like as part of like, that's the deal that made me in there. No, it's the losses. It's I slammed my face into a wall. And let's talk about that, which I actually did at SaaStr last year. I ran into a pole when I was talking to somebody, probably like as passionately about this. He tried to grab me and I slammed head first, like bruises on my face into a light pole. I remember that story. But you say, Mike, tell me about the most joyous moments from SaaStr. I don't remember that. Did I have fun? Yes, but I can't remember that. I remember smashing my head into a pole.
Tell me about your toughest deal.
My toughest deal?
Yeah, your fieriest
How
deal.
would you define toughness?
However you would want to. So just like we were talking about, it's the hottest fires that forge the strongest steel. What would you say is the deal that was the toughest for you, that you learned the most from, that shaped you the most?
Okay. This is a three-year deal. And it was a hospital system in Colorado. And it was at my time when I was selling IT operations analytics software. And I had worked with, you in sales, you above the line, below the line, right? I'd spent year one basically below the line. I was on the inside sales team, partner development. I'm working with the actual users in the field on this thing. And we'd done some trials and budget and this and that. And this is back in the days when there's a lot of variability in the healthcare system, particularly with this customer about like, where's the money coming from? So that was year one. Year two, we got above the line, right? So we started talking to the director, the VP, and the CIO, developed relationships out there, visited, took out to dinner. I know their kids. I not personally, but like I know about their kids. Like you develop relationships. So that was on a one-on-one basis. And then in year three, my company had been partnered with a big vendor. Let's just call them a big vendor. Whose software my platform was dependent upon, or whose platform my software was dependent on, is the right way to say that. So because my software was part of a bigger contract, made the decision that I'm going to go work this with them, right? I'm trying to get everything under one umbrella instead of trying to get my little piece purchased separately. So I started working with that team. And so it's going to be difficult for me to describe exactly what happened here. But it was a account executive and then specialist type situation. There were multiple specialists on the team, and my software, I was considered basically an account executive specialist on that. So you got the quarterback, and then you got, I forget, you're in the UK. So you have some defensemen. I don't know. All right, quarterback, and then other people on the team that the quarterback's leading to throw the ball to. So this was Christmas time. That was the best part about it. This is late in the year. It's Q4. We got to get this. This deal is the difference between me making the accelerators and not. 6 figures of my stuff and a 7-figure deal overall. So the team, the AE, the specialist, and the technical people, they head to the office to meet with the customer. We know the CIO, director of IT, VP, and they put us on a group chain. They text, hey, heading into the office now, like, let's go crush this thing. And I respond something like, yeah, good luck, guys. Like, go do it. Now, one of the specialists responds with a jiffy. And the jiffy is what you might consider inappropriate, right? So it's like, like sometimes they do these cartoons where if you just put a black bar over some part of it and you look at the action happening, even if it's a cartoon character or whatever, now it looks inappropriate. But if you saw the real thing, it wouldn't be, but this is considered inappropriate in it. It was a jiffy like that. And then the message was something along like, let's go knock it out, or something like that. But something innocuous, but at the same time, inappropriate, right? Don't respond to them. Like, these, just sales guys being sales guys, which is not the mantra I would have anymore on it, because what happened next is that we got a call from the CIO. First it was the AE, and then it was me. And the note was, hey, the meeting's canceled. It looks like there was a group chain, and it looks like the director of IT was put on that. The woman director of IT, and this was something that could be considered offensive if you were looking at that lens, at whether it was intentional or not. It's difficult to describe without getting to the details in here, but it was not a good look. And so the CIO meeting's canceled. We'll talk about this later. So the meeting falls apart. I'm getting now on a separate group chain with just the people that are on our team getting a message. Oh, sorry guys, like whoopsie doopsie. It's like, yeah, whoopsie doopsie. So anywho, a week later, CIO calls me again direct and explains to me like, hey, this is what happened. There's the group chain and the director was on that chain and she sent me the message. And this is wholly inappropriate. But you know what? Beyond that's inappropriate is that you didn't say anything. You didn't say, Mike, that was inappropriate to send that message. And as I think upon it now, should I have called them out for it? Like, perhaps. And I would say yes, because I said yes to him. Like, you're right. I should have said something about that being inappropriate. So anywho, I asked the question of, is this the reason that you're going to not buy this solution that we spent the last 3 years trying to identify would provide maximum value to your organization? And he said, I haven't made my mind up on that yet. Right. So like that's how critically this was looked at. And what's my lesson learned from all of that? Did we get the deal? Not before I left. So I left the organization and I later heard that they did get the deal. Right. So somebody else won that. But that's how I lost my Q4 bonus and accelerator was on that specific deal. And like, I'm actually like thinking through it again now. Like, did I learn my lesson on that? What should I have done? I think the lesson was like, always be proactive on that thing. Because if I would have, right, if I would have recognized that as insensitive or unacceptable, like inappropriate, and just said that to those guys, maybe we would have a different outcome. Maybe we would have said, Mike, I'm buying your software, but not all the other stuff. But I didn't. And so the lesson learned is always take that action when you see something out there that isn't okay from a professional standpoint. Is that an okay story?
That was a great story. Did you feel like it wasn't okay at the time?
It wasn't okay to say that?
No, like what they'd sent in the chat, was it something that you recognized that wasn't okay? Or were you just like, nah, it is what it is?
Idiots being idiots is kind of how I looked at it, right? Would I have sent it myself? No, but like it wasn't intentionally offensive to anybody. I don't think it could have been portrayed as like, we're going to go screw this customer. Let's go, guys. But I think that's how it was received. And again, like misfire on who was on the chain. At the end of the day, though, like I had that story because it was a misfire of who was on the chain. I wonder how I would feel about it if that didn't happen. And like these jackasses, just idiots being idiots, sent that stuff. You should recognize that. Like it's incumbent upon like you as a person, as a sales leader, to set your boundaries with people on like what is professionally acceptable. Is it professionally acceptable? No. Between friends on a group chain or something like that, sure. But that wasn't the context. And so, yeah, at the end of the day, unacceptable.
Wow. So that's very interesting. And I think that the bit about the boundaries and letting people know what is and isn't acceptable and like know your context and know who you're talking to, I think is so important. Why did you get into sales? You
ever see the 1972 Sidney Pollack film with Robert Redford, Jeremiah Johnson?
Cool.
You've not seen it. Okay. I don't suspect our audience for the most part has either. Anywho, it tells the tale of his ex-Spanish Civil War. I think that's what it is. Mexican-American War. Anywho, Robert Redford is this guy in the 1840s and he's had enough with war and he's going to go live a life in the mountains, right? A life of, I don't think it was intended to be rest and relaxation, but then he's faced, it's a parable of life, right? And the struggle between life and nature and all that fun stuff. And growing up, VHS, our VHS player or the tape, like we'd have to re-record it on some TV channel because I'd watch it so much that I would get that. My family has a cabin in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, which is, there's two parts of Michigan, the Lower Peninsula and the Upper Peninsula. The Upper Peninsula has 2% of the population, 30% of the land mass. So it's a vastly underpopulated, beautiful, scenic. My great-grandfather was a copper miner back in the day, and then he fished in the summer. And that's where my family's cabin is his old fish camp. He died of tuberculosis. It's okay. You don't have to be sad. In like 1925 or something. Anywho, I'd watch Jeremiah Johnson, and then I'd go and I'd be up in the wilderness, and I loved it up there. My plan was, after I went to college, because my parents said, you got to go to college, is that I was just going to go live in the woods and be a mountain man, right? Live off the land. I got to school, and one of my first classes was business law. And I had this professor, Joel Turnimi, who sadly passed last year. And I was so enamored with the way that he taught business law that I thought, I'm going to go be a lawyer. I love this stuff so much. In fact, I took the opportunity. He put out an email and said, if you want to, I'm writing this paper and I need some help. If you want to have a co-authorship on the old CV coming out of college, hit me up. And so I think I was the only one who responded. And we wrote this. He wrote this paper. I helped edit it and like do all the research on the things that we were citing and whatnot, and like eliminated some words so that we would fit the parameters. But it's goodbye to Camelot. He wanted to call it the crumbling of Camelot, but you're not supposed to use language like that when you publish a legal paper. But it's about the statute of limitations in adhesion contracts. See, I can still rattle this stuff off because I was so passionate about that. So I thought, you know what I'm going to do after school? I'm going to go become a lawyer. It turns out you need money if you want to go to school to get a law degree. I had my mom was in the tech industry, and she hosted a number of parties when she lived out in Denver for a company she was working for. And I think it was my spring break. There was a party, and I met this fella, Steve Capelli. And Steve Capelli went and worked for this cool new company called Compellent. And it's like, it's a, I know it's dense and it's data and it's technical and all that fun stuff, but like their sales team, I got to tell you, it's a wild experience. They're crafting these guys and they're going out and they're making a boatload of money. I'm like, well, let me give that a shot. So I went and I interviewed at Compellent. It was this group of really passionate about sales guys and gals, and they all had a background in sports, and they all had this positive, aggressive mindset in there. And at the time, I was the treasurer of the badminton club at Michigan Tech University, right? Very high, prestigious. And I got into an argument with them about whether tennis or badminton was a more intense sport. And so I sent a very detailed, thorough follow-up note to them after that. And the guy who actually pushed and said, no, I want this nerd on my team. I want the badminton guy named J.R. Terrelson. And I got hired. And so I started as a junior DGR selling steaks, and then moved my way up to a senior DGR who was cold calling people to sell data storage systems, and then eventually partner development, and then outside sales, and like, a cast of characters that I met throughout the whole experience. Steve Jazerski being one of the best bosses I've ever had. Chris Nordyke, who he was the sales manager of Michigan. And so I wanted to get back to Michigan so I could earn money and then go live off the grid. And I met him, and he's like, all right, this kid's got something. He's got some passion in it. And I think like bringing it back to the beginning, what makes you tick, like a genuine curiosity about how all this shit worked. It's not always obvious. Like, it wasn't obvious to me, like, what this sales thing was. I'm like, I'm selling steak to people. I'm calling them up saying, will you, a lunch and learn, steak and storage, we called it. Will you come sit at this thing? And each step of the way, each one of those career journeys is like kind of these aha moments of like, no, don't think about it like that. Think about it like this. Think about it like this, you have to have this curiosity about what you're doing. If you're just thinking you're making calls and selling steak, you're gonna have a fucking horrible time. You're here, might as well make it fun and interesting. So we started doing that. And I guess that's kind of how I got to where I am now in sales leadership, is just always having that curiosity about what's one, suspending my belief or disbelief about whether I knew what the hell was happening. And then two, being surrounded and identifying people who like equally had that passion and curiosity about what makes the whole thing tick.
Nice. Very nice. Very nice. You mentioned that Steve was one of the best bosses you've ever had, or best leaders that you ever had. What for you makes him one of the best, or the best, whatever?
One of the things that made him really good that I only recognized later is that he was, and I don't mean this, and if Steve's listening, this is the right way to do it. He was unattached from the outcome on it, right? Like, he really viewed his job as to curate this team of individuals that all had this passion about things. And I think his unattachment for whether or not the outcome at the end of the day allowed me to fail a lot more and accept that failure was okay, especially cold calling, especially in those days, especially in a hyper competitive industry. It was 99% failure on it.
So at what point in your career did you start leading people?
I went from an outside sales rep. I took the opportunity, just like you did, with a voluntary separation plan with my organization, right? Hey, we did too many acquisitions over here at Dell at the time. Anybody want to leave if we give you some money? And I say, absolutely, I'm out. So I did it, and returning to the circle, I moved my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, but we moved to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. She got a job in education because that's what she's in. And I took some time off to think about what I wanted to do next. I joined a reseller and I started selling the hot, thick territory of the Upper Peninsula of Michigan and northern Wisconsin. And I'm proud of what I did. I got Eagle Mine, right? A mining operation out there. I worked with 2 of the universities that were up there. I dealt with what I had, and then got the opportunity to move downstate and join some of those people I had originally worked with at Compellent at a new company called Blue Medora. So at the time, they didn't have an outside sales position in a territory for me, but they said, hey, join up, and perhaps there's an opportunity for leadership if you can get the inside sales team going. Do what we did, what you went through back there. If you can start doing that, we'll get something going. So I joined the inside sales team, got to work on building out the process and all that, and found out hey, this is actually a lot of fun. So we took some funding, we built out the inside sales program, had a blast, taking these people from parallel career paths and right out of school and otherwise, and, kind of giving them that same opportunity that I had growing up in sales of hey, there's actually a better way to think about this thing. Hey, you actually want to lean into failure. Hey, this is you can also apply these skills to your real life. So let's develop some life skills here that you can use when you're negotiating, buying a new car, and you're doing this and that. So I found my grandma always said that I was either going to be an actor or I was going to be a teacher. And what I found through sales leadership is I kind of combine these the overlapping concentric circles of those skills that you might have in there, which is to 1, perform, and 2 is pique curiosity, change brains, get people to those aha moments. So we would do things like a guy on my team, farm guy, he knew a boatload about tractors. So for one of our exercises one morning, I remember we went on Craigslist, we found some tractors for sale, and then we had Clay call the farmer and try to negotiate, this 1938 XYZ, he knew all about it. So leveraging those skills, though, reflective listening. This is back when Chris Voss just came out. So we all read that book together. But I found a real passion and I think skill in taking people from nothing or something and transforming them into sales professionals.
What were some of the things that you had to learn as a leader as you started in your leadership career?
One of the big lessons I learned was that it's not my job to be liked. My job is to execute the mission and hit the number. And that's one of those hard lessons that you have to learn as a sales leader. I mean, to this day, it crushes me. It kills me when you only hire people who you have a sincere belief can succeed. And the reality is that sales isn't for everybody for a number of reasons. I have a sincere belief that anybody can change. Anybody can do sales. The question is, do you want it though? And sometimes it's timing, sometimes it's circumstances, sometimes it's competency, and all of that's okay. We're all made different. That's fine. But learning those hard lessons of who can succeed, who can fail, and to recognize that I'm going to have to that's part of the bill that you take when you take on the title, is that you have to make those decisions. That has been one of the hardest lessons, because it's, for me personally, professionally, getting to know people and then having to say goodbye, it's tough. It's tough for anybody out there. But at the end of the day, recognizing that if I'd be very, very, very sad if I felt like I didn't do them an honest, solid job of trying and giving them some of those aha moments and putting them in a better place for the next part of their journey. I can honestly say to everybody that I've been able to take to some next stage, right? Whether they leave on their own or whatever, that I have to make that decision with them on, that they're in a better place now. Not that they're dead. That sounds like they're dead. but no, they're in a better part of their career journey, and I help them get there.
Yeah. Tell me about the first time you had to fire someone and what did you learn? Because there are going to be people listening to this that are going to have to let someone go. What are some of the lessons that you learned from the first few times that you fired people?
One, that it doesn't get easier when you have to do it. So that's a lesson learned. Like, oh, this is the first one. A bit. Two, trust your gut. Right. Like, and I'm also like of the mind of like, don't trust your gut. Like, people can change and all that fun stuff. But when you have a feeling, and if you had to gamble on it, I'm not a gambling guy, but if I were to bet $1 on it, is it worth $1 to bet on somebody when your gut says probably not? Yeah, take that into consideration. Trust your gut, especially as anybody who's in sales leadership, I pray, has been a sales professional at some point in their career. When you're a sales professional, generally you're on a team. Generally, you can look at the other activities, how people approach their business. Like, you have a pretty good dial on whether or not other people can be successful doing this thing. As a sales leader, now you're doing that, but from the top down, and like, you got a gut instinct on some of these things. Trust that gut instinct. And then the last, I'd say, do it with compassion. It sucks. It sucks for everybody involved, but it doesn't suck more for me than the person who's getting let go. So recognize that and be a freaking human at the end of the day, because I've had to do it both ways of like, here's the script and here's my emotionalist body, despite what's on the inside, like saying these things to you. Long term, for the network, for the humanity in yourself, so that you can sleep better at night, do it when your gut says that you have to do it. Make the hard decision sooner and do it as a human. And there's a lot of reading into that you could take, but yeah, it never gets easier, never gets fun. It's not cool. I don't like it. Yeah.
So Mike, just as we close, we are going to do our tick fire questions. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
What's one of your go-to interview questions when you're hiring someone, and why?
When I'm hiring salespeople, one of my favorite questions is, I just got done watching the latest binge on Netflix and I'm looking for something else. What would you recommend? The reason I ask that is because it's one of these concepts I have, especially when I'm teaching salespeople, is like, the question isn't the question. What's the question? What am I asking for? I'm really asking to see, like, how would you recommend something to someone that you don't know anything about? Right? We just started the interview. I'm asking this question. It's a personal question just about this. Are you going to ask me, well, what was the show you just watched? What kind of shows do you watch? Tell me more. Like, what are you looking for? What are you in the mood for? Like, blah, blah, blah. And then I'm also judging their character of the types of TV shows they watch, as a TV snob.
Yeah. I hear that. I love that question. Leaders who are going to thrive in the next 5 years will be excellent at
embracing change. I mean, with AI, AI. Yeah. No, it's going to be a question. I've shared this with my team. The sales pros who are going to be successful, and I guess sales leaders, tangentially, are going to be the ones that know how to leverage it for good. Right now, we are seeing a lot of what not good looks like in AI. Garbage. Worse than just giving me a blanket cold email. I've responded to more cold emails than I have with this AI personalization nonsense. So it's going to be knowing and figuring out creative ways on how to use it to get better at your job, to be more efficient, and without taking the humanity out of it. Because, like, if a robot can do your job, let it do your job. But in sales, you do it because you're a human and you can make those connections. So freaking A, man, like, use it the way it's intended to be used, to help you automate the stuff that can't be humanized.
If you could have anyone in the world on your podcast, who would you have?
Robert Redford. I have this, Robert Redford, he didn't get his career start in it, but he was in a Twilight Zone episode, and I don't want to give you any spoilers on it, but I have this idea where I could have one of his last remaining legacies to join my podcast and kind of reprise that character from his original Twilight Zone episode. Do you even know who Robert Redford is?
You mentioned him earlier, right? In the movie that made you want to get into sales, right?
Yeah, but as an actor. So he was like I didn't watch it in the Marvel. He was like the general and Winter Soldier, right? That's how you might know him. But he was, Butch Cassidy in the Sundance Kid. He was a Sundance Kid. He was in The Sting. He was Barefoot in the Park, Sneakers, Last Castle, Spy Games, All Is Lost. He's a well-known legacy. Paul Newman, the salad guy. He was Paul Newman's bro, right? A well-known actor and a master of his craft.
I know his face. I didn't know his name. Yeah. I recognize him.
Yeah. He's actually in, oh my God, there's a meme out there and most people don't know it, but it's the guy and he's got blonde hair and a big beard and he kind of looks at the camera and he smiles and nods and it's zooming in slowly. That's from the movie Jeremiah Johnson.
Right. Okay. So that's who you'd have on your podcast. Okay. In that specific character from Twilight Zone.
Yeah, absolutely.
At this stage of your career, what's your definition of success?
Waking up every morning excited about what I want or what I'm doing. Working for an organization and a company that just kind of like strokes that little part of your brain that makes you excited and curious. And I've been fortunate enough to spend a lot of my waking days and hours in organizations like that. So yeah, that's money is great. I love it. Can't have enough of it. Like, let's keep doing that. Yes, please. At the same time, back to this philosophy of like, if you're going to do something, might as well, you might as well do something that you're actually interested in and passionate about. And I'm fortunate that I happen to have a career where I'm interested and passionate about the things that I'm doing. So yeah, there's no greater thing in life that you could ask for, just being excited about what you're doing every day.
Mike, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I've really enjoyed our conversation and I'm very sure that everyone else will too. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. It's been fantastic getting to know you.
Likewise.